What's the greatest crime of all centuries? Welcome to Marfado Family Group for ancestral spiritual congruence. But what is the real definition of crime? For us to get the core of this issue, we need a stipulative as well as precising a definition of crime. Stipulative definition assigns a meaning to a word for the first time, and precising definition defines the term crime correctly and more precisely. We do so by using a number of melanin dominant languages. In Swahili, crime is uhalifu. In Chikaranga is mosha. In the Somali is dembi. In Inyanja is upandu. In Yoruba is ilufin. In Zulu is ubugebenga. In Xhosa is uwapulimteto. The English word for crime owes its genesis to the Greek expression krimos, which is synonymous with the Sanskrit word krama, meaning social order. But we know that the Greeks were barbarians. They came to Africa to learn. And therefore, it is only the stipulative definition and precise definition. When we use Ubuntu or Bantu languages, we arrive at the understanding of what is a crime. Do you know that the Srebrenica genocide that happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Nazi atrocities, Mongol conquests, Armenian genocides, Japanese genocide in China during World War II, Rwanda genocide, and the Spanish genocide when they colonized the Americas, that all these pale in comparison to this greatest crime of all centuries. Who do you think committed this worst crime in history? Why do you think we must answer this question effectively, or these questions effectively? The Khmer Rouge killing fields in Cambodia, where a lot of people were killed by the Khmer Rouge between 1976 and 1980 under Pol Pot's communist regime. They killed almost 2 million people. Is this the greatest crime? No, it is not. The Rwandese massacre, which we have spoken of, in 1994, for 1 year, almost 1 million people were killed in 100 days, making it one of the highest volume genocides in history. Is this the greatest crime of centuries? No, it's not. We go to Russia, where Stalin killed almost 40 to 50 million people. And in fact, in the magazine at the time, he was given the accolade of Man of the Year in 1938 and 1946. But did he commit the greatest crime ever? No, not yet. What about Mao Zedong? 1949 to 1976, throughout his rule of communist China, Mao Zedong terminated almost 100 million people. Was he the most horrific criminal, or did he commit the most horrific and greatest crime ever? No. The real arbiters on truth in any crime and judgment must not be human beings, but spiritual values. That in ancient Africa, crimes were considered as actions against other persons, ancestors, divinities, or humanity. Punishment was meted as sanctions against persons as well as families who committed these crimes. In Hamit, Africa, where the Greeks came to learn, the term for crime is buta or iputa, spelled this way. A capital crime was buta nyamata, great crime. Anyone who committed such a crime was judged worthy of the death penalty. Killing anyone intentionally had spiritual consequences. The family can, through funeral rituals, arouse the spirit of the deceased to fight back until it is avenged in what is known as the avenging spirit ngozi or ingwendele. This is the hierarchy of the spirit world. The avenging spirit is just close to umtakat or witchcraft, and between shavi. So it is instigated by the clan or family or totemic tribes, mzimu, or the family spirit, to arouse that, and also to ask the war spirit majukwa, and also the divination spirit or the spirit of the divinities, or sangoma or mundoro, and also going up to the rainmaker spirit gomre. So we have given a clear-cut aspect of how the real arbiters on truth in any crime involves certain spiritual levels and spiritual elements. Now, who do you think committed the worst crime in history? Why should we answer these questions effectively? In answering these questions on the greatest crime of all centuries, we consider the following parameters: severity, which is the barbarousness of the crime, the length of time the crime was perpetrated, and also that it was committed without any provocation. Yes, we know that the Rwandese massacre of 1994 had other tribes come in play. We also know that Khmer Rouge killing fields in Cambodia 1976 to 1980 was a great painful time. As Stalinist communist regime, Mao Zedong's regime, that these were purely evil, but they are not among the greatest crimes ever. The period these crimes were perpetrated ranges from only maybe 100 days or a year to maybe 15 or 14 or so years. But the crime we are talking about here, the biggest crime ever, goes on for millennia. It is still occurring today. Yes, the cruelty of other crimes and these crimes that we name here was horrible, but the numbers are lower. Plus, these were committed almost by a small little clique of people, and at times instigated by war. We are looking at the biggest crime that mixes all possible evils for over 100 years or more, but committed not only by an individual or a clique of people, but by a race against another race that did not provoke or pose a threat to the race committing this crime. We begin with rejoining why we must answer this question effectively, because the same criminal or criminals or mindset or spiritual element may still be around us today. Because we know that those who ignore history are doomed to face the consequences of history. This is what happens to people that forget it. They perish because they become victims of the greatest crime of all centuries. This is a graph showing the genocide of wars from 1900 to almost 2005. What do you consider to be the greatest crime in history? There are many different crimes or types of crimes and many classifications, but we want to think of murder, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault, and kidnapping as some of the greatest items within the parameters of the greatest crime. But when all these are combined for millennia, for years, maybe 1,500 years, and still going on today, then whatever situation that arises on, or whoever people falls under that category, are suffering from the greatest crime of all centuries. The greatest gift is human life. Each one has a duty to live their life fully in a natural, peaceful way, with challenges, of course. Therefore, murder is the worst crime, no matter the motive or circumstances. But it must meet our parameters of severity, barbarousness of the crime, length of time, and provoked to become the greatest crime ever. So, while this murder is the greatest crime of all centuries and millions have been killed in wars and other diverse ways, there is a race that appear to have suffered almost every criminal activity on earth, not only murder or genocide, but is still suffering almost every criminality and torture and evil today, 1,400 years. Starting more than 700 years before the transatlantic slave trade, the Islamic or Sahara Islamic trade, slave trade, also known as the Arab slave trade, began in the late 7th century after the Arabs successfully defeated and took over Hamid and soon controlled North Africa, East Africa, and parts of West Africa, such as northern Senegal, Mali, Ivory Coast, and Nigeria. This is the first example of the greatest crime of all centuries committed on melanin-dominant human beings by Arabs and Quran-reading individuals of all races and creeds. There is an example here. Very, very, very sad. Between AD 650 to today, Africans are at the brunt end of Islamic slavery, colonization, and abuse by Arabs. Over 300 million melanin-dominant humans have since perished. This crime is still going on. It is unprovoked. It covers colonization, murder, assassinations, and mental deception using the Quran and Arab traditions as superior to melanin-dominant culture. It is the greatest crime of centuries ever. We continue to show that the story of East Africa and Islamic role in the transatlantic slavery is subtly played down. That's deception. They have not even apologized. This is what they did against people that did not provoke them. They are still doing it today. 1,400 years of mass murder, genocide, deception, and destruction. Christian influenced is transatlantic slavery. There it is. This is also one of the greatest crimes ever committed. It's in one category. They are the same people because they are using the Bible, which is the source of the Quran, which is the source of their beliefs. This is how they treated us, and this is how they treat us. At least Christians, they try to apologize here and there. The Pope tried to apologize here and there, but they have not outrightly come out to apologize. The second greatest crime is the Middle Passage and colonization of all melanin-dominant lands on Earth, and the destruction and the genocide of melanin-dominant human beings from India to the islands, to Australia, to New Zealand, across the whole Pacific, and many, many other places, including in Europe. This was and is equally as horrible and terrifying as it could be. The Middle Passage describes the harrowing journey lasting several months from Africa's west coast to the Americas, during which millions of Africans, packed like sardines in the slave ship, died of thirst, hunger, rough seas, and sometimes from the sheer brutality inflicted by European enslavers. The Arab slavers did not only march their African captives to Arabia, they also sold them to European slavery. Over 500 million people were taken away, with almost 180 million perishing in both the Atlantic slave trade and the Islamic slave trade. This has a conservative figure, over 1 billion people. You can add all that what Pol Pot did, Hitler, Mussolini, Mao, everything in Srebrenica, but you will never get to 500 million souls that died. We are not talking of those that survived. We are talking of those that perished. Here is what they did. The traumatic journey, which was instigated by people that we didn't even provoke, involved beatings, murder, and rape. Some hoped that death would take them back to Africa, and they threw themselves into the ocean. That's why here it is the underwater sculpture located in the Caribbean Sea along the coast of Grenada, honoring those African slaves who were thrown overboard from a slave ship during the Middle Passage of the Holocaust. And they thought that if they died, they would return back to their own country. Committing suicide was also an act of rebellion. The crews of slave ships were always anxious to prevent enslaved people from killing themselves, because each person who managed to take their own life reduced their voyage profit. This is arguably one of the greatest crimes of all centuries. It's the same crime, just like the Arabs and Muslims. The other biggest and worst but forgotten crime against melanin-dominant human beings involves the genocide that was perpetrated by the Chinese, the mulattoes, on the Kudara Paikeche genocide masterminded by the Tang China over a period of 1,000 years perished. Our ancestors and other native people who had built the most powerful and brilliant civilization in Asian history were destroyed and killed. The Akudara, the Middle Kingdom. You can read this book, Paikeche's Principle, and watch our video, Global Agenda Against Black Asians, the Paikeche's Principle. You can find the YouTube on our channel. These people crafted methodical mass genocide and ferocious attacks on millions of melanin-dominant human beings, and in sweeping waves of war involving mass rape, torture, ill and war, liquidating and mass murdering, not thousands but millions upon millions of black people. They continue even up to today. Therefore, that's why you cannot find any melanin-dominant people in Asia. You can read this book, Paikeche's Principle, The Greatest of Asia, by Brother Bayem Biyik. The Mongol mulatto hordes murdered over 300 to 400 million melanin-dominant humans in all of East Asia. This is also the greatest crime of all centuries. In conclusion, therefore, who do you think now committed the worst crime in history? We have suggested very critical information that certain groups, not each individual but groups, committed the greatest crime of all centuries against melanin-dominant humans. Your answers are clear from this presentation. The critical reaction pivots on the most ignored aspect to all this. Whose law are we using? We have already concluded that we are using our own paradigm, our own laws, Bantu laws, traditional laws, Mahati laws. Because today we know that judging these crimes appear that the criminals who committed the most heinous crime have become the lawgivers. They now control our political systems, legislature, judiciary, health, and religions. Why do you think we must answer these questions effectively? Because the same criminal and criminals and their mentality is still around us today, depriving us of deriving pleasure and living a happy life and causing war and damage. All these crimes, robbery, kidnapping, pickpocketing, snatching thieves, stealing information, knowledge and culture, everything, minerals, abduction, slavery, all these crimes, extortion, murder, all these crimes, melanin-dominant people have suffered more than this, on top of slavery. Why? Because of a certain spirit, a certain divinity. Consequently, human suffering, pain, and untimely death, murder, genocide are the greatest crimes of all centuries. And whoever causes any of these knowingly or otherwise, of any creed, race, or color, is a demon or possessed by a demon. And this is the cause, the demon that causes all these crimes at a larger scale. The greatest crime of all centuries was caused and is caused by Shata, who murdered our ancestor Ausarije. To restore your personal and family victory against Shata, the demon causing millions to commit the biggest crime ever on earth, send us an email on join@marifado.com. This is Preacher Rabbi L.M. Dumizulu saying subscribe to our channel, Kamiti Iburu Ethics. Till we meet again, Edupe, Siabonga, Tatenta, Enkos.